Hello, everybody. Happy Facebook Live Monday here with us at Wag the Dog and Company. So today is our first official episode in our new series about rescuing as just the first step and talking about rewards-based training for shelters and rescues. So anybody who is here and is joining us, I would love to hear, are you volunteering at a shelter or rescue? Are you working at a shelter or rescue? Or have you adopted from a shelter and rescue? We'd love to hear who's here joining us and here to talk. So while we're waiting for some of those comments, I myself worked at an animal shelter, an open admission animal shelter in Dane County, Wisconsin for about 5+ years. Prior to working there, I volunteered for 2. I regularly fostered dogs that came into the shelter, and I adopted 3 from the shelter itself. So I'm very passionate about the rescue and shelter community. And Victoria Hohlfeld, who's going to be joining us here in just a second. She is the Assistant Executive Director at Pitbull Advocates of America. And she also is very passionate about sheltering and rescuing, with especially an effort being placed on pit bull terriers. So we're going to talk with her about drawing the lines and placing boundaries, and how that's always a difficult thing to do in rescue and shelter. And talking to her about how Pitbull Advocates of America decided to draw the line where they were going to exclusively be utilizing force-free training with their dogs, as well as making it a requirement for their adopters. Of course, as you can imagine, that came with both benefits and challenges. So we're going to talk about that and how changing and growing has affected Pitbull Advocates of America. So hello, Linda. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited for this too. Linda Green is the founder and a rescue based in Guatemala, and she's going to be joining us next week, which is super exciting. Keep those who you are coming. Okay, so here is Victoria. Hello, Victoria. Thank you for joining.
Hi.
Can you give us a little bit more about you, your experience, how you got started in rescue, how you got started and found rewards-based training? Please do tell.
Oh my. So a couple loaded questions. I got started because my husband and I were living in North Carolina, and we had gotten this puppy. We were 19 at the time, got this puppy off of the side of the road. Somebody was selling puppies on the side of the road in North Carolina, because apparently that's what you do over there. And we thought it would be a good idea to get one. His name was Buster, and found out that he was a pit bull type dog and didn't really have any experience with them previously, so I didn't really know. I did some Googling, and Googling that I did wasn't fantastic at the time, so we were going to be moving back to Wisconsin, so I Googled pit bull organizations in my area, and an organization called the Brew City Bully Club came up, and I emailed them and started volunteering when we moved back. So that's kind of how I started. I've been doing that since 2012, so it's been a little bit.
Yeah, it has.
It has.
For sure. So, with regards to the training aspect, what did you find that you kind of got into that right away with Buster, or do you feel like that maybe changed as you were volunteering with Brew City Bully Club?
Yeah, that definitely changed quite a bit. So we had Buster and Gunner. So Buster was the pit bull type dog. Gunner was a German Shepherd. And when we were in North Carolina, we took training classes. We took them at the local PetSmart, and they had suggested the use of a prong collar for Gunner. And at the time, not knowing anything about anything, I trusted a professional, and I was like, okay, sure. I don't really like it, but if this is the only way to get my dog to walk well on the leash, then fine. Um, so my personal training philosophy has changed tremendously since we first got our dogs, and it's been a gradual um, learning experience and a gradual change for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm always learning more, and I always want to learn more to do better for our dogs. So
That's great.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah. And now, would you say, what was the big impetus for you guys deciding that you were going to strictly go to rewards based force free training for the, well, the Pitbull Advocates of America, formerly Bruce City Bully Club? What made you guys make that decision? Because that's a pretty big one. That's not small at all.
Yeah, it is a big decision. I've been thinking about that question a lot because I knew it was coming up. And to be honest, there was no one trigger for us that we were like, okay, now we're strictly moving forward with requiring our adopters to use positive reinforcement training. There was definitely a tipping point for us moving from straight adoptions to foster to adopt.
Mhm.
And the organization as a whole, definitely, again, like my personal growth has evolved significantly in how we view training and how we view the dogs that we rescue and all of that. Um, so while we had always used it on the dogs that we rescued personally, the foster home, like that was a little looser, or the adopters. I remember years ago, must be 6 or 7 years ago, like having a conversation with a bunch of coordinators at the time, and we were like, okay, well, should we require positive reinforcement, because that's what we do, but like, should we have this requirement for our adopters? And at the time, we like really hemmed and hawed over it, and we were like, well, we can't really tell people how to train their dogs, so we should just kind of let it go. And then as we evolved and as we learned more, we were like, okay, well, we believe this so deeply as an organization. Why would we not require that for our adopters? So for that requirement specifically, it's just been more of a evolution type thing, whereas the foster to adopt was more of like an incident based. Okay, now we're moving forward, because
Mhm.
I feel like with the foster to adopt, that allowed us a little bit more control over how the dogs were trained anyway,
Mhm.
so that if the adoptive home had issues, we were able to get in there and to help them, with the hopes that then they would just continue that type of training and
Mhm.
learn along the way. Um, but but yeah, I can't give you a good answer for that one. It's just we've evolved,
So you
and
didn't
yeah.
always have the foster to adopt. You previously, you did what most rescues do, or shelters, where it's just, okay, you want to adopt, here you go, stamp, dog's yours. So
Mhm.
you moved to the foster to adopt, which from my experience with you guys, can it last a depends on the dog how long that foster to adopt. There's no specific, okay, after a month you make a decision, the dog is yours or not, sort of thing. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no time limit. It depends on the dog and the behavioral issues of the dog and the family and how they're working on it. And to when people go through this foster to adopt process, we really want them to be committed to adopting. So we don't want them to think of it as like, oh, well, we'll just try it for a couple of weeks, and like if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Like, no, we really want you, come hell or high water, to adopt this dog. It's just for us to be able to go in there and to really help you through those issues. Because we found previously, when we just did straight adoptions, is that we'd be like, hey, is everything okay? Can we help you with anything? They'd be like, no, totally fine, fine, fine. And then we'd get the dog returned with more behavioral problems than what it went with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of why we instituted that foster to adopt kind of holding period.
Okay.
But if a dog has significant behavioral issues that we're working through with a family, we'll leave it open for a couple months if needed. It really just depends on the dog and the situation.
Right. Right. So do you feel that the foster to adopt, because technically the animal is still your property, right? So that does give
Hmm.
you more ability to have people following through with the recommendations that you're giving. And I know
Yes.
you give a lot. Like, it's not just like, oh, here, you should go talk to this person or talk to that person, or here's a handout. You're meeting with these people, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they have, again, it depends on what we're working with and what behavioral problems they have. If I am unable to help or provide enough guidance, then I'll totally rope you in, which I've done several times before. So appreciative of that help. But but yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like, we'll absolutely help them through whatever issue they're having. And two, I really want to start people off with like the basics and the foundation. So for me, that's you need to know dog body language. Like, here's an example. Like, even during meet and greets, if a dog shakes off or if a dog yawns, I'm pointing that out and talking with them through that. Be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, he just yawned. Like, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He's not tired. He's a little stressed out because this is a lot right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so foundations, I'm really hammering home. Enrichment, I always do a spiel about enrichment because it is so incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I think having somebody like me to be able to reach out to is really helpful too. Um, I,
Hmm.
I'm I feel many rescues or even shelters for that matter don't have a training team or behavioral staff. Even the shelter that I worked at for a long time, we had people who had experience, but we didn't have people who had education that actually truly grasped the topics enough to be able to educate others to say, this is why we're doing it this way. This is why we're doing this protocol. This is how dogs learn, and this is what is going on with Lola, for example. We didn't have that for a long time. And we were one of the luckier shelters where we did have more resources than most. So, and I know
Yeah.
you've been to a lot of different rescues and shelters all over the states through,
Yeah.
because you do
It's,
ASPCA work too.
yeah. I've been on 2 deployments with the ASPCA in their temporary shelter to help with cruelty victims,
Mhm.
um, which is pretty amazing. I suggest everybody should sign up to be a responder. But but yeah, I mean, knowledge level varies. The resources that you have vary. If I had to do it all over again, I would definitely create a training budget for sure, hands down. Because when you get into rescue, I'm assuming it's the same for a lot of people, but I didn't really understand how important behavior modification would be and how much we would need to rely on it to get some of these dogs adopted. I don't know if that's just our string of luck with our special kiddos that we've had. But it's really hard. And that's a lesson that I feel like is really important for rescues to take away, that training is just so incredibly crucial. And really that behavior modification, whether it's body handling or reactivity or whatnot, all of that's so, so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it's really important to keep these dogs in their adoptive homes, to help
Yeah.
give them some quality guidance along the way, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that's definitely hard too, because while I can provide some support and some help and tell you why your dog's doing this and like the general overview of how to fix it, you really need a qualified, certified trainer to help you through that. And we've got you, of course, but there's only 3 that I like ever recommend because I know them, I've worked with them before, I know their training techniques. So I'm very like, you need to go to one of these 3 people, please, for help.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I remember when I first started volunteering at Bruce City, because it was the same thing. When I was moving from Madison to
mm,
Milwaukee, um, I was working at the shelter. I had been in the lead for the Positively Pities. I'd taken that over from one of the girls who had started it there, and was very like, where do I find my people as soon as I got here, and
yeah.
I know I was like, I can train. I'm a trainer. I can help. And I remember Michelle saying, I don't know, Victoria's kind of picky. I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to prove myself, which I think is fine. I think it's fine that you were picky because,
Yeah.
I think as a rescue, because I know that you've asked me about a couple people who've offered to give you training and things like that.
Mhm.
I'm sure that rescues are kind of inundated with quote unquote trainers saying, let me come train your dogs for you, sort of thing. So to help get their name out there or in hopes to become a referral. So it can be hard to know. And when you don't have a training budget, because many shelters and rescues don't, you're like, sure, you're donating your time and your expertise. We'll take it. So I think it was good for you for being on the more like, let's wait and see sort of side.
Yeah,
So
for sure, for sure.
yeah,
And I mean, like, that's something that a lot of people don't know. And just because you're in rescue, I never knew for the longest time that dog training was like completely unregulated. Like, and I didn't know like the detriment that that caused to dogs either. Like
mhm,
I just didn't know. So just because you're in rescue doesn't mean that you automatically know all of this stuff. Like,
right.
it's a pretty serious thing when you've got somebody donating your time, but you don't like, and you need the help and you want the help because you want the dog trained, but maybe how they go about the training isn't necessarily in the best interest of the dog. It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would you say were your biggest growing pains from transitioning to having that line? I'm sure that um, that you've had to deny a lot of people when they come along, and like, how do you do that gently? Um,
Dude, if anybody has a foolproof way of doing that, please let me know because that is hands down the worst. I hate denying based off of training differences. And I hate it because training is such an emotionally charged personal decision that people feel like is based on opinion. And that's just not accurate. And it's so hard. I hate denying based off of training alone.
Mhm.
To be honest with you, if there is another reason, I will go for that over solely based on training. I've never had a really good experience where I've denied on training and they
Mhm.
have like we've changed somebody's mind or anything like that. I if I have to, I am just completely honest and I just usually say like, listen, I don't feel at that time that our training philosophies align, and therefore we're not going to move forward with your adoption at this time. Blech. And I'm so sensitive to that because like I said, used a prong collar on my dog. So I didn't know like breeders versus rescue at that time too. So I knew better and I wanted to get a dog from a rescue. And if a rescue told me, no, you're not good enough because you walk your dog on a prong or whatever the case may be, I'd be like, who the hell are you? Like it's tough. It's really, really tough. And I don't ever want to make people feel like they're not doing right by their dog or anything like that. But if anybody has a foolproof way of denying somebody based on training methods, let me know because it's
Yeah,
hard.
if anybody who's watching has any idea,
Yeah.
do let us know. It is hard because I mean, I've had people even just reaching out to me and specifically asking if I will teach their dogs the brown use of their electric fence. And I don't even know this person, and they're just reaching out to me saying they want to give me money to train their dog on how to do that. And how do I eloquently say that that's not how I train and without saying you're hurting your dog and that sort of thing. So I usually kind of sidestep it and I will send them my link to my about page and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
have you read about my training philosophy and how I do things and I can't help you with this. I'm sorry," sort of thing.
Yeah, and two, I like how we have it on our website too, because in my opinion, it's pretty clear about where we stand on our training philosophies. So if somebody is using hardcore aversives, I would hope that they'd read our stuff and come to their own conclusion that like, okay, like we're probably not a good fit like the organization isn't a good fit for us or vice versa or whatever the case may be. Because we're pretty bold on where we stand with how we want our dogs trained and managed.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And in fact, I made a couple snips from the site because it's so
mm,
good. So here is one that I really like. Um, Uniting communities by reducing misconceptions surrounding dogs perceived as pit bulls through compassion and science-based knowledge. So it's not like we're just,
yeah.
pulling and making this up, which I really love.
Right.
Um, and then I've got this one here: when you know better, you do better. And I think that is, with all of our work together, is that tattooed somewhere on your body? Because I
No,
feel
but
like
it will be.
because I feel like, when I think of that, I always think of you, because that is, you know, Victoria also works for me, everybody. And I was lucky enough to have her join me July this year. And she helps to keep me sane. And there have been times where she's needed to remind me of this stuff too. When we get frustrated with ourselves or with our clients or something like that, she always brings it back to, how can we, help them so that they can do better in the future? How can we give them that education to help them? And like Jennifer Malloway here says on the side, maybe you're planting a seed and helped them to realize how important this is and why you have this plastered all over your site. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And I think on your adoption contract, you're like super clear too. This is kind of small lettering for everybody, but if you want to read that, Victoria, and tell people, why that this piece, because you said this is your favorite paragraph on that page, and
Yeah, so
yeah,
this is right after our like our requirements. So this is the paragraph that's right after that. And it says, we believe all dogs should be treated, managed, and trained using force-free training methods. For the perfect fit to be achieved, training philosophies need to align between PBAOA and our adopters, or there needs to be evidence that you're open to learning. The training and behavior landscape has changed dramatically in the last 10 years alone. We've made huge strides in understanding our favorite companions and how they learn best. It's imperative that our adopters don't use any punitive training methods. If you're unsure what this means, please review our training philosophy page for more information before completing an adoption application. So I feel like that's pretty clear on where we stand. And our
yeah,
training philosophies page is pretty clear too, in my opinion. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I feel like that's really important. And too, like we don't need to, like our adopters don't need to know everything about positive reinforcement training or force-free training or whatever you want to call it. We just want to make sure that you're open to learning more and that you're committed to not using aversive training techniques on the dog that you're going to adopt.
right,
Um, so yeah, so I mean that's definitely a pain that we've had for sure. Um, and we had switched websites in 2020. Previously, we were using the term positive reinforcement. So what I had found was that a lot of people in their applications were putting in positive reinforcement, and I was just like, do all of these people know, like, like that's a pretty specific term for the general public to be using.
mm-hmm.
And then we found that like when we would meet with adopters, they didn't know. So that I feel like is a pain too, and a thing that we have to deal with as well, because people just put something in the application that they think that you want to hear. So that has been a little challenging to suss out as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I also love that you have this available. So this is when I always go to resource pages, be
Yeah.
it a trainer site, a breeder site, or a rescue site. I want to see what they're promoting and what they are telling people to use. And you guys clearly lay it out here. In that last blurb, you had the link to the training philosophy, why force free, helping them to find a trainer, knowing what questions to ask, and then hitting some really big points with appropriate dog play, because that's a big one for our pit bull terriers that people get freaked out
Yeah.
about. Enrichment and your favorite tools, and then handouts and videos. So if they don't know right away what that is, you're giving them the resources here to learn more. It's I thought it was fantastic, and it put a lot of it's a lot that was a lot of work on your guys' end to create such an in-depth page, but I just
Oh my
love that you
gosh.
did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff out on the internet, and I feel like we really wanted to provide one place for people parents to go to find the stuff that they need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like learning, like you said, pitties and play, like what's going on there, like what is appropriate play, what is over the top. Like that's just really good information to know. That
Mm-hmm.
handouts and videos, that's got body language handouts, that's got body language video, so important for every pet parent to know, really. Same thing with enrichment too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how to find a dog trainer, because again, dog training is unregulated.
Yeah. And people
That's a big deal.
unfortunately don't realize that until they've spent a lot of money
Yeah,
on
no, as a regular consumer, you have absolutely no idea. And if you just happen to pick a trainer and you may not feel good about the methods, but you're doing it anyway because you think that that's the only way to do it and you don't know any better.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a tough spot to be in. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, it's a very
It's
tough
hard.
spot to be in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Linda's got a comment for us. So it says, all that you are saying for declining based on training, we also offer a Zoom meeting to people we decline for training to explain in more detail why positive methods are so important. We have a script and send position statements. Sometimes applicants ask for the call, and we have had really productive conversations with those at least planting the seed. That's great.
Yeah,
I
that's
really
really
like that.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
that's fabulous.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you're on the bubble, and you just don't know any better and you're not really entrenched in using those methods, I feel like there's great conversations to be had for sure. Like we've definitely adopted to people who have used those methods in the past, but like through conversation, we're like, okay, well, this is why it may not be such a good idea, or here's what can happen in some cases. Like let's have a conversation about it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's definitely hard.
Yeah, yeah. And
And I'm
Linda's,
sure it does take a lot of time, Linda.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. It
don't
does
doubt
take
that
a
at
lot of
all.
time. But
It's
that's all
important though.
relative, right?
Yeah.
Because does it putting that more time up front, does that help to ensure that these dogs are staying in a home and are safe and happy and confident, so that you're not, getting these guys back later, or, that sort of thing. So there is a lot of time up front, and I'm sure a lot of management and admin pieces and things like that that go into it. But I would hazard a bet that it's worth it. I hope so,
Yeah, for
Linda, because I
sure.
know you guys do a lot of that too. Yeah. How about when you guys changed? Did you did you get any flack from volunteers at all?
No, actually, not that I'm aware of.
No.
No, we didn't. Again, it was like a really gradual thing. Now, yeah, when we had the puppies, we were really picky on how the puppies were handled, and you need to listen to directions, please. And I'm sure sometimes I didn't always come off very nice to the volunteers, but like, man, it was so important that you please don't screw up those puppies.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you
and like
tell them
in
a
so,
little bit about those puppies? They weren't just normal puppies.
oh my gosh, we don't rescue normal dogs. Bless their souls, they're just fantastic. Um, Yeah, there was this mama dog that was a stray for about a year. Um, very comfortable being a stray. Animal control could not get a hold of her. She gave birth to four puppies. I think she actually gave birth to five, but there were only four surviving. Um, and they had body handling issues like right away. Like, I don't, what was it, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, five? I don't know, but they had body handling issues very, very early on.
Yeah.
And
Like severe.
really fearful.
Yeah, this is
What?
some of the most severe body handling I've ever seen from a puppy, or let alone an adult dog. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So
Yeah, I
Victoria had a
believe that
good
they were
reason
on
to
their
be
own
strict.
for a couple of weeks
Hmm.
before they were brought into animal control. And
Hmm.
then they came to us, and then they were being handled all the time when they never had handling ever. And they were born to a mom that was under a lot of stress and was fearful herself. Those puppies had a lot of stuff going against them for sure.
Yeah, yeah, they had a lot of cards there stacked against them.
Hmm.
So yeah, and everybody wants to touch the puppies, which is the extra hard part. So it was like double the working on BMOD right away with puppies, and then trying to get all the other puppy stuff in there. I'm sure your mind was just going crazy, and
Yeah, it was really hard for sure. I remember having we had like a puppy social, so we would have people over, but then we'd have like rules. Be like, okay, don't touch the puppies unless they come up to you. And then when they come up to you, one of our volunteers is gonna stick some food in their face, and then you can touch them. And it was, yeah, it was fun.
yeah.
And we kept those puppies for longer too, so we didn't adopt them out at 8 weeks. It
Hmm.
was way after a lot of rescues or shelters normally would have adopted them out just because of the behavioral problems that we had. And we wanted to make sure that we had a good handle on it before adopting them out. And even then, they stayed in their foster to adopt for a little bit after.
Yeah,
Um, that stuff's just hard.
yeah, yeah. I think that. Yeah, that was extra hard for you guys for sure. Um, and yeah, they got to come to the puppy socials, which was funny and great.
I
I've still got
know.
video of
Yeah.
them at the puppy socials. Yeah, they had a good time.
Hmm.
But yeah, they needed some extra help. And if they would have
Oh,
gone
yeah.
into any Joe Schmo's home that wanted a puppy, that could have been really scary and ended up really bad for sure. So I think it was really important that you guys had the ability to help them and to make that decision to keep them longer, because it's hard to make that
Right.
decision to keep them longer, especially when you have limited space, be it either at your center or with volunteers. That is tough. When shelters and rescues are always very limited on what they have for resources.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Yeah, that's another thing. Man, if I knew what I knew now, I'd totally do things so differently. But like behavior is so important when you're rescuing. I feel like that's the number one thing that rescues need to consider is behavior and the well-being of the dog,
Yeah,
the whole dog, like the well-being, medically and emotionally too and mentally.
yeah, I fully agree, which
Mhm.
is why we started the series. After having some experiences that weren't so great, just really helped to prompt me
Yeah.
to say, hey, let's get this out here. How can we help people in getting this information out to them? Because I know when I first started in the sheltering community, there wasn't a lot. And there also, when I was starting to become a dog trainer, wanting to be a dog trainer, were not a lot of opportunities and resources out there. They were very limited. But that is not the case anymore. Now I think it's
Mhm.
just a matter of knowing what is good and sifting through it, and what is actual evidence based, and what is just somebody's opinion of the week. So I think being
Mhm.
able to help people to find some quality information to help utilize is super important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So, one of the things I also wanted to talk about with you, which gets into why you guys, kept the puppies for so long and making sure that they were on the right track, making the decisions on what dogs that you guys are going to be adopting out.
Mhm.
Especially, I feel like this is especially because of our pit bull terriers and the reputation that they already have. So you want to do your best to be putting the as best as you can out into the community so that they can be lights of looking and look at what a wonderful dog my pit bull terriers are. So,
Right.
and in general, with rescue, just like you were just saying, how important it is to have them healthy medically and behaviorally? And then, what it is, when do you say, I don't think we can help this dog? And making that decision.
It's a terrible decision.
It is a terrible
Um,
decision. Yeah.
I hate I hate it. I hate it. I hate it because nobody ever gets into rescue wanting to euthanize dogs for behavioral or medical issues. That's just not something that any rescuer enjoys doing at all. Um, and it's really hard too for me because you really need to think about the liability um, that you're potentially putting back into the community. I don't believe that we should be putting dogs that are of high liability back into the community. Um, as much as that totally sucks, because you're trying to get this dog adopted out. And in that process, somebody could get hurt or another dog could get hurt. Um, we had a dog that we were working with, I don't even know how long, a year, maybe a little less. Um, she was on anxiety medication. We tried behavioral stuff, severe stranger danger issues. Um, and going through the adoption, we were like, okay, we have a plan, everything, like we're going to tell the potential adopters what to do. Everything was going good. The potential adopter made one small move, and that was to move their hand across their leg, and she snapped at them. Okay, can I safely adopt that dog out? Like that's a really hard question that you need to ask yourself as a rescuer.
Mm-hmm.
um, we continued to work with her for sure, but in the end, it just wasn't safe for her to be adopted out, unfortunately. Totally sucks.
Yeah.
Um, and there's just no easy way around that, but you have to consider the liability that you're putting back into the community. Like she was a dog, if she were to get lost or if she were to get out, there's a high probability that she would bite somebody trying to find her.
Mm-hmm.
She also could not receive vet care, like could not be handled. So what do you do with that too? Like
Right.
we had to fully sedate her to do anything. And like the pre-medication, like we gave her pre-meds before the vet, that didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um Man, it was just rough.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And two, we also have the luxury of spending months to try to rehab a dog. I know that not every rescue or shelter has that ability. Um, but that's something that you definitely need to consider too, is like, okay, we know this dog is a little iffy with body handling or strangers or other dogs or what. Do we really have the capacity to keep this dog for months and really put in a solid behavior modification plan before we even consider adopting out?
Right. Well, and then it's the person, finding the right person.
Oh my gosh,
Because
yeah, finding a,
this,
yeah.
yeah, that unicorn, right?
Hmm.
Because having lived with a stranger danger dog she never did bite anybody, thank God, but she almost, she was put into context that put her way over threshold. This is when I wasn't a trainer, didn't know what I was doing. I thought I could just quote unquote socialize her by taking her places. And what I did was I taught her that the only way to get herself out of these situations was to bark, growl, and lunge at people. And that became her go-to. And so you think about these families who are adopting these dogs, they can't be social with people. They can barely go out for walks sometimes. It's really hard, and many, because of aggression and fear, and phobias is the majority of my cases and what I specialize in. I have more than once had to help people through making a decision on whether or not to keep a dog. And when
Hmm.
it comes down to a dog having this severe of behavioral issues, it comes down to, if you who know and love this dog cannot work with it, can't help it, who then?
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's a hell of a tough decision, but I think that it is really responsible and compassionate for rescues and shelters to make that decision on their end rather than having to put it on the people whose homes these dogs have gone into plate and the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that dog were to have seriously injured somebody, I would just feel horrible, absolutely horrible. And too, like if you are adopting out a dog that has, behavioral issues, but you do feel like it's workable, we need to be completely honest with the fosters and adopters too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Lord help whoever gets Sherman next, because we're gonna have lots of long conversations. And thank God for Jack and oh my gosh. Her name's literally right on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, now you're gonna make me forget. Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, Jack and Liz,
Yeah.
duh. They're
Yes.
amazing, and
Yes.
like, dude, kudos to them for like listening to me for like a couple hours over like 3 or 4 meetings with that dog.
Yeah.
But like, you need to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be, because it also gives the potential adopters a realistic expectation of what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just be like, oh, well, here's a dog, he's a little shy, but he warms up. Like, you got to go a little bit deeper into that. Like, what are the contexts we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about? Is it men? Is it men when they come in the house? Like, oh, you
Yeah.
really need to know the dog that you're adopting out, and you need to be incredibly honest with those people.
Yeah. I fully agree. Yeah. Thank God for Jack and Liz. Jack and Liz were literally like the unicorn that you never
I
get
know.
for foster parents that
I know.
came to the rescue of Sherman. And
Yeah,
Sherman
I mean,
was,
they fell out of the sky, and I am
yeah,
so incredibly grateful to them for everything that they've done to help that dog.
yeah,
He's
they've been amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
I
and
think,
we've been really lucky too. Like, when we take our time to find the right adopters, we're so incredibly lucky with who we end up with. Like Bubbles,
hmm
I'm sure you remember Bubbles.
yes.
Yeah, they had a little bit of some challenges with the child in their home, but how
Mm.
did we land them? Jeez Louise,
Yep.
fantastic.
Yep.
So, when you take your time, you really find some phenomenal, phenomenal homes.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing with fosters that you find some genuinely good
Hmm.
fosters that are able to take direction and ensure that they're giving you information as behaviors are coming along. Because I think that's you guys have so Pitbull Advocates of America, they have like a little retreat as we call it, where the dogs can go and decompress before going into foster or foster to adopt homes. But so lots of rescues they'll go directly to fosters, so
Hmm.
the foster parents are finding out a lot about these dogs, and you need to have an open communication system so that you're checking in on them and that they can be reporting what's going on so you can get on this right away rather than a month later. Oh, this dog has been reactive on leash and tried to bite my brother, a month ago. That's not helpful when they're just bringing back the dog to go to a potential adopter's home. That would have been helpful a month ago so that you could have started working with it. So really finding those fabulous volunteers and celebrating them and letting them know how awesome they are because they are giving of their time and really helping out.
Yeah, for sure. We've been so incredibly blessed to find some really amazing foster homes. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how they found us, but those dogs are so lucky. Like Sherry and John with Amelia too. Jeez
Yep.
Louise. It's
Yep.
just fantastic.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Finding them and keeping those. That's
Yeah.
definitely a really good key point. Okay, so let's then, is there anything that you say would be your top three? I feel like you've kind of already said them, but I think that it would be good to say them again. Is what do you think would be your top threes that you would love for the animal welfare community and guardians for that matter who have adopted or have dogs in their home about rescue and shelter? What do you think is the three things? Like if somebody's just getting started in rescue or animal sheltering, or maybe you're even somebody who's watching who wants to support rescues or shelters. How, what should they know?
Sure. Definitely, if you're just starting out in rescue, you have to understand that behavior is absolutely key 100% of the time. It is not enough to rescue a dog and adopt the dog out. You need to care deeply about the process in between and the dog's well-being after. You need to definitely educate yourself on training methods, and the best way to go about that too. We know that there are several national and international organizations that have position statements out on how they feel dogs should be trained. I think that is incredibly important for
Mm-hmm.
every rescue person to know, that there are some standards out there that we need to be meeting for the welfare of the dogs that we're rescuing. So important. Enrichment, so important. And just learning about your dog overall, or the dog in your care overall, their likes, their dislikes. um, I feel like all of that is incredibly important, and understanding that dog training is an unregulated business, so you have to do some research on the trainers that you have, whether it's rescue or if you just adopted a dog.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really hard because, and this is another live that I want to do at some point, is helping people to read trainers' websites. The person can make themselves look very
Mm-hmm.
educated. I went to school, and I took psychology classes. Great. That's still not, I'm sorry, but that's not enough. That's
Yeah.
you need more than that to understand dog training. um, so reading some of that language and understanding, and then if it's not clear, knowing what to ask when you do reach out to them, so that you're
Mm-hmm.
very clear upon what methods they use. And if they aren't clear when you ask them the methods that they use, that's a sign that you need to walk away, that they're just making it up as they go, or they're trying to hide things. So I think it's very important to learn how to read that sort of stuff and be a smart consumer, because it is a bit like reading the back of your cereal box and what's in the cereal, except that's regulated. So that's hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I definitely wish I would have known that earlier.
mm,
Like, I had no idea that there was another option to walk a dog, or a big strong dog, other than a prong collar. I had no
yep,
idea.
yeah, yeah,
And too, like, for me, the big stickler is that, like, we're training wild animals to, like, voluntarily give blood draws, right? So, like, we can train a tiger to voluntarily give a blood draw. If we can do that, we can walk a dog without a prong collar. Seriously, come on, guys.
right,
Let's do
exactly.
better. It's crazy. Yeah. When I learned that, that was like a light bulb moment, I feel like, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's like just not necessary.
It's not.
We can't, it's just, us as humans, I feel like we're so easy button for everything. I want it now. I want it fast. That's it. Amazon Prime that to me is what it is. So I think what's really nice is when you get these guardians that understand what training takes, is they really grow a bond with their dogs, because they're stepping back, taking a moment to observe their dogs and learn about them and how to interact with them. And once they figure that out, that communication just so you can just see the difference between the dogs and the people, and they're so excited. Like, we've got some clients now that we've been working with for a while, and they are so proud of themselves, and I'm so proud of them, because they're like, yay, my dog is smart. And I was like, I know your dog is smart. But it just took a little bit for them to start to learn how to communicate, because there had been no communication there for so long. Why would the dog keep trying if the humans obviously aren't trying either? So
Right, right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a really good, fantastic point. Like, we used aversive training methods with our first two dogs, and we never did anything like that with Tank. And I can tell you hands down that the bond is completely different. Completely different, especially with my husband too. Geez Louise, man, I wish I would have known.
yeah,
Like, that bond is just different. You communicate better and you're more in tune with your dog. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And why would we not want that? We get dogs for best friends, right? For
Right.
constant companions.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Fully agree. Well, is anybody who is listening or here watching, do you guys have any questions at all? We're happy to answer them. And if you are watching this recording at a later date, go ahead and still pop in those comments and questions, because we come back and we do look at these and help to provide answers to questions. We love doing that. Part of what we're going to be doing is I'm creating a resource list for those that are in the animal sheltering and rescue community to help them to find quality information and education. So I'm compiling that, and that will be provided on our site. So that will be soon. So, if you let us know what you're looking for, what you need, that'll help us to really get even more detailed with the information that we're provided. And I will be putting the link to Pitbull Advocates of America in the page so that you can check them out, because they really have a beautiful website that took them a lot of time to make, and just kind of getting some ideas of how they help people to help themselves, which is really wonderful, and help them to learn how to do more and do better. Can you repeat the name of your rescue and website? Yeah, it is Pitbull Advocates of America. Let me see if I can't pop up my text here, and I can copy and paste the in the comments right now, maybe. I'm just gonna type it. Okay. Yeah, so check out Pitbull Advocates of America's site. There's other rescues out there that you think also have a fabulous job at having the resource up there and help that are helping dogs to stay in their homes, having a great adoption process. We'd love to hear more. Love to hear and talk to more people. Um, okay, well, thank you, Victoria, so much for
Thank
joining
you. I
us.
enjoy talking with you as always.
Yes. Super. Okay, so next week we are going to have our second episode of Rescuing is Just the First Step, and we're going to be having the wonderful Linda Green. Linda is the co-founder of Unidos para los Animales, also known as United for Animals, out of Guatemala. And she is also a certified professional trainer and behavior consultant. So we're going to be diving in with her about assessing and addressing dogs' behaviors and their needs on intake and foster, placement, and post-adoption support. And with Linda's group, they are adopting out dogs to all over the country. So really, she's become, I'm sure, quite the master at finding strategies to make this as smooth as possible and making sure that their adopters are getting the support that they need. She hasn't always been a dog trainer, so she did get into dog training because she found that a lot of the adopters were coming to her and asking her questions on things that they needed help with, and found that she was just taken a shock back by the information that was out there for the adopters. So she said there's got to be a better way, and then went to school. So she is also a graduate of the Academy for Dog Trainers, which is my alma mater, and where Victoria is going to school. So obviously we have a little bit of bias about how much we love the school, but we really do, and it's helped me to meet a lot of wonderful people. So we're excited to meet with Linda next week. And again, leave us your questions as you have them, and we will see you next Monday. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.